So let's talk about digital currency. It's not just some tech experiment anymore, right? Our source material paints a picture of a global battlefield, a clash between the old guard of crypto and these new, let's call them regulatory-ready systems. And today, we're jumping right into that fight by looking at two very different players, Bitcoin and Pi Network.
And that really brings us to the core question of this whole explainer. As the world keeps changing at this crazy pace, which one of these cryptocurrencies is actually built to survive? We're talking about a future with game-changing tech and, actual government rules. It really all boils down to survival of the fittest, or maybe survival of the most adaptable.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at their DNA. Are they rebels or integrators? Then, we'll throw them into a quantum stress test to see what breaks. After that, we'll see how they handle a world full of rules. And finally, we'll dig into what actually gives them value, price versus utility. And then we'll tie it all together to see what's next for crypto.
All right, first things first, let's talk about where they came from. Because really, you can't figure out where something's going until you know where it's been. And these two, they come from completely different worlds.
And right here, this is the fundamental clash. You've got Bitcoin, born as a pure rebellion against the whole system. And then you have Pi Network, which our source says was designed from the get-go to build a bridge into that same system. Two totally opposite starting points.
So, let's zoom in on Bitcoin, the rebel. You have to remember, this thing was born out of the ashes of the 2008 financial crisis. People's trust in banks and governments was just gone. And into that void comes this wild idea: money without anyone in the middle. Pure, radical independence. That was its superpower, for sure. But, as our source points out, it might also be its Achilles heel down the road.
Now, flip a coin and look at Pi Network. The story here couldn't be more different. It wasn't about tearing things down, it was about building within them. The focus right away was on real people, verifying identities, that's the whole KYC thing, and creating an ecosystem that could actually function in the real world. So yeah, Bitcoin was built to be an outsider. Pi, it seems it was built to be an insider.
Okay, let's switch gears. We're moving from philosophy to a straight-up technological threat. Something big is on the horizon: quantum computing. And trust me, this isn't just some nerdy tech issue. This is a stress test that could shake the very foundation of digital security. So, what the heck is quantum computing? Well, think of it like this. It's a new type of computer that's so ridiculously powerful, it could potentially shatter the digital locks, the encryption, that protect pretty much everything we do online. And that includes a lot of cryptocurrencies. This isn't some far-off sci-fi concept either. This is a real, future risk that the big players are already taking very seriously.
So how would this attack even go down? Our source breaks it down into a few steps. Step 1, a quantum computer sets its sights on an older blockchain. Step 2, it just brute forces its way through the old school encryption. And then, step 3, this is the scary part. All those old legacy wallets, they're suddenly wide open. The whole thing could trigger a domino effect, a total crisis of confidence in those older designs.
Okay, so what does this mean for Bitcoin? Well, according to the source, this is where Bitcoin's design starts to show some cracks. It's built on that classic cryptography that's at risk. The network itself is famously hard to change or upgrade. And, this is a big one, there are tons of old wallets out there with exposed public keys just sitting there. The risk isn't just about stolen coins, it's about the entire market panicking if those weak points ever get hit.
Now, the source lays out this hypothetical scenario. And let's be super clear, this is not a price prediction. It's a what-if based on structural risk. In a post-quantum world, the idea is that Bitcoin wouldn't just see a price drop. The bigger deal is that it could lose its story, its whole narrative, as being the ultimate digital gold or safe haven. That's a fundamental change in how the world sees it. So if that's the potential storm cloud over Bitcoin, what about Pi Network? Well, the source argues its biggest strength is just one thing: adaptability. The whole idea is that when technology is moving this fast, the only thing that guarantees survival is the ability to change. And here's why that might be the case. Pi's underlying structure, or architecture, isn't completely rigid. It's built to be flexible. It doesn't have this huge backlog of old, vulnerable wallets. And the key thing is, it's supposedly designed to be able to plug in new security upgrades, like post-quantum stuff, when they're ready. It has time to prepare before the threat is knocking at the door.
Okay, let's pivot again. We've talked tech, now let's talk politics. Because the Wild West days of crypto are coming to an end.
We're moving into an era of rules and regulations, and governments like the US are finally drawing some clear lines in the sand.
And there's no mystery about where this is headed. We're talking about real laws for how markets should work, how to protect investors, and how to stop crime. The whole point is to bring crypto out of the shadows and into the mainstream financial world. And that kind of shift, it's a huge advantage for any network that was built with compliance in mind from the start.
Now think back to Bitcoin's whole rebel philosophy. It was literally designed to exist outside of these rules. So now regulators are trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, applying rules after the fact. That's why it often gets labeled as just a speculative asset. The takeaway from our source isn't that Bitcoin will fail. It'll probably survive, but that it just wasn't built for this new regulated world.
Pi Network, on the other hand, seems to have been built for this moment. Our source points to things like mandatory identity checks and a distribution system that's controlled and traceable. The argument is that this design makes it a natural fit for the new rulebooks. In a world where compliance is king, being built that way from day one is, well, a pretty massive head start.
All right, that brings us to the final showdown, and it's a big one. What actually drives their value? What makes them worth anything? Are we talking about scarcity and hype, or is it about what you can actually do with it? This gets right to the economic heart of the matter.
And you can see the two different answers right here. For Bitcoin, value comes from things like its limited supply, what the market mood is, and the stories big institutions tell about it. But for Pi, the source says its value is supposed to come from something else entirely. How many people are actually using it, how many real transactions are happening, and how much demand there is inside its own little economy.
So based on that idea, the source lays out a hypothetical growth path for Pi. It's all tied to how many people start using it. You know, an early phase where it finds some use could mean double-digit prices. If the network really grows, maybe you get to triple digits. And if it actually goes global and integrates everywhere, well, then the potential value could really take off.
Okay, so let's zoom out and put all these pieces together. What we've really been looking at here isn't just Bitcoin versus Pi. It's about the end of one chapter for crypto and the beginning of a brand new one.
And our source puts a name on it, Crypto Phase 1. That was Bitcoin's era. It was all about rebellion, limited supply, and let's be honest, a lot of wealth got concentrated in a few hands. But Crypto Phase 2, which a model like Pi Network might represent, is about something different. It's about working with the system, having real-world uses, and getting everyone involved. That's a huge shift in what crypto is even for. And this really leads to the core takeaway from all of this. The argument isn't about who has the loudest fans or the most passionate ideology. In a future that's constantly being rewritten by tech and by new rules, survival isn't about being the strongest, it's about being the most adaptable.
So let's leave you with this final thought to chew on. Bitcoin, without a doubt, changed the conversation about money forever. But as we head into this next chapter, the big question is, can a totally new kind of model, one built on integration and actual use, be the thing that finally changes the system